I've been teaching quite a few years. I've been out teaching in universities and colleges for about 20 years. And in those first years when I came out, I believe fall of '87, I had my PhD and I went out and I started teaching. And I asked my kids in class, my first philosophy class that I taught at beautiful Bethany College in Lindsborg, Kansas. I said, kids, and they were kids. I was kind of a kid too, it seemed like. I said, if two people disagree on what is beautiful, must one of them be wrong? They all looked at each other and they said, no, they can both be right. I said, well, what does that show? And one young woman in the front said, well, beauty's in the eye of the beholder. I said, oh, good. And I said, kids, if two people disagree upon what is good, must one of them be wrong? And they kind of looked at each other and they had kind of a difference of opinion. Some said, well, yes, one would have to be wrong if two disagreed about what was right or good. Another said, no, of course not. They can both be right? Because goodness is in the eye of the beholder. And then I said to them, kids, if two people disagree upon what is true, must one of them be wrong? And they looked at each other and they said, well, no. One person would have to be wrong then if two people disagreed upon what was true, because, of course, truth can't be in the eye of the beholder. Fast forward 20 years, South Dakota State University, I asked my kids, we're all a little older now, if two people disagree upon what is beautiful, must one of them be wrong? Well, of course not. Of course, beauty's in the eye of the beholder. If two people disagree upon what is good, must one of them be wrong? Well, of course not. Goodness is in the eye of the beholder. It's a function of the judger, right? Hey kids, if two people disagree upon what is true, must one of them be wrong? Oh, a couple in the back row said, well, I think one must be wrong, but most of them said, no. Truth is a function of who makes the judgment. Now, what I saw was roughly 90% of the kids in 1987 believing that beauty was in the eye of the beholder. That went up to 100%. I saw about 50% on goodness. That went up to about 95%. And I saw about 5% on truth, maybe 10%, and that went up to about 80 or 90%. This is called relativism. Relativism is the assertion that what we regard as true, good, beautiful, is a function of the one judging it. It's a very old philosophy. This was the philosophy of the sophists who lived in the 5th century BC. It is why Plato and Aristotle decided to write. It's why Socrates started to debate on the streets of Athens. Because there is something self-contradictory, wayward, and just plain incoherent about relativism. But we have it today. We have it today when it comes to talking about the old story, right? Of Jesus and his love. Of course, it is true for me. But for you over there, oh, that's not true for you. Another thing is true. And that one over there, that's not true. But that one over there, that's true. But that one over there, that's not true. But that one over there, that's true. Right? This is quite different than in the 1st century. This is quite different than when Paul preached the good news. This is all very different. Now, we live in a time, of course, where theology is sometimes people make a little fun at it, actually. You know this? I was watching a show not too long ago on television, and they had a couple economists on there, and one of them said something about gross national product and talking about this ratio. And another guy talked about something else, used a lot of words that most people didn't realize what they meant or understand. And the other guy looked at the first guy, the second guy looked at the first guy looked at the second guy, and he said, "Oh, you're just speaking theology. Gobbledygook. Lots of big words, arcane words from a different time and a different place that don't communicate. How many angels dance on the head of the needle?" And yet, of course, people lived, they died over such things as whether the Son of God was of one substance with the Father or a similar substance with the Father. It made a lot of difference in the 4th century, and 5th century. Yes, we live in a time, my dear friends, when theology is sometimes considered to be an old parlor game done by old white guys, right? Not people up to date. Surely no one postmodern as theology. In fact, the great prophet of postmodernity, Jacques Derrida, the Frenchman, said, theology is the enemy of postmodernity and deconstruction. Yes, a lot of us perhaps believe that when faith comes, it has very little to do with what we believe, but it has everything to do with that we believe, right? So sometimes we tend to think that this thing called faith is all about emotions. And the more emotions we got, the more faith we got. And I remember not too long ago being somewhere where the lady was giving a presentation, and at the end she was talking about this, and I made a comment, and she says, "You think too much. You think too much. The Holy Spirit can never work through you if you think so much." I call that the emotionalistic distortion of faith. There are others, of course, who say, "Oh my goodness, faith isn't maybe so much about feelings, but it's certainly about making solid effort. It's about willing to do things to be the case, or willing to do things. It's about going out into the world and changing it. It's about being prophetic." And these are all good things. But if that's all faith is, that's the voluntaristic distortion.